I'm going to take my choice of Sukhasana. I'm going to take this adept pose. It's a nice, comfortable option. I can sit like this for a while. Just a little movement, just to make sure that my body is nice and free. I place the backs of my hands on my knees and take chin mudra with the finger and thumb. My spine is long. I'd rather talk about the spine being long or lengthened rather than sitting up straight, because rather than when I sit up straight, then I allow my spine to take its natural curves, which is important. So I allow my spine to take its natural curves. The crown of my head is lifted, my chin is level with the ground, my shoulders are slightly back. I might choose to close my eyes, but I'd like you to leave your eyes open for now. Bring your attention to your breath. So really, for the first time today, I become aware of my breathing. And now that I've taken control of my breathing, I'll lengthen it and deepen it and slow it down. Long, slow breaths. I close my throat slightly to engage Ujjayi breathing. That gentle ocean sound of breath as it flows in and out in my body. Stay with your Ujjayi breathing as I explain a little something about the nervous system. So what I've got here is a human brain. Not a real human brain, of course, but a plastic human brain. And usually, breathing, the action of breathing is controlled by a very primitive part of the brain called the medulla oblongata, part of the brainstem, very base of the brain. So this is the part of the brain here that deals with your basic life support, your pulse, your breathing, your heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, so on. Here, so in the everyday, this is all happening autonomically. It's a function of the autonomic nervous system. You can substitute the word autonomic for automatic if you like. Autonomic, it's an autonomic function of the nervous system. But when you sit and you take control of your breathing, then you move the control of breath from the more primitive part of the brain to the cerebral cortex, to the thinking part of the brain. You're moving the action of breathing from an autonomic function of the nervous system to the somatic nervous system, which is under your conscious control. From autonomic to somatic, from automatic to under your conscious control. So that's pretty special. That's a pretty amazing thing. Also, since we're considering the nervous system, then the autonomic nervous system works in one of two ways. It either accelerates and excites, or it slows down and quietens. Raising your heart rate, respiration rate, releasing adrenaline. This is known as a sympathetic action of the nervous system. But when things slow down, when the heart rate decreases, when the respiration rate decreases, when the hormonal balance in your body changes slightly, and the fluctuations of the mind stuff start to move from being this crazy ocean with waves and peaks and troughs to flatten out into a more gentle pond, then this is known as activating the parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So when we sit and we take control of our breathing, we move the function of breathing from autonomic to somatic, from the brainstem to the cerebral cortex, and we activate a parasympathetic response in the nervous system, just damping and calming everything down. Explaining the science of yoga with the science of Western medicine. So, bring your feet together in front of you. I'm not looking at Baddha Konasana. I want to create a big diamond shape with the legs. But bring your feet together and catch hold of all of your feet. Inhale as you extend forward. And exhale as you bend your elbows outwards. Keep length in the spine. Keep gazing forwards as you fold at the waist. When you come to the bottom of your pose, nice and gentle, you can bow your head if you want to. Bringing the spine into flexion. Flexion, a forward bend of the spine, in this case. Just breathing and experiencing the expansion and contraction of the breath. Maybe sinking a little bit deeper into your butterfly pose as you continue to breathe. Now on the next inhale, we'll rise back up to sitting. Inhale and rising. Place your hands behind you, fingers facing forwards, and allow your shoulders back, allow your head back, and bring the spine into extension, a gentle back bend. A counterpose to the flexion of the previous pose. Inhale here, and exhale back into your flexion, your butterfly pose. Catch hold of your feet, lengthen the spine, exhaling, bow your head. Inhale, rising and curling, place the hands behind you, spinal extension. Exhale, move into flexion. Inhale, rising. Extension. Exhale, lowering. Flexion. Two more like that. Inhale, rising. Extension. This takes place in what's called the sagittal plane of movement, front to back. Exhale, flexion. One more. Inhale, rising. And exhale, lower. We'll stay here briefly. And then inhale back up to sitting. So spinal flexion, spinal extension takes place in the sagittal plane of movement. That's front to back movement. Front to back, assuming that your base position is Tadasana, is mountain pose, a neutral standing position. That's where all of this anatomical language is based upon. That's the position that these movements and planes of movement are based upon. Now that's sagittal plane of movement. Other movements that happen in the sagittal plane are flexion and extension of the joints. Flexion and extension of the knee joint in that case. Flexion and extension takes place in the sagittal plane of movement. There'll be a chance to ask questions and stuff later, so we can explore that a little bit deeper. Let's look at another plane of movement. Let's look at lateral flexion in the frontal plane. Tuck your left foot up into your groin and extend your right leg out at about 45 degrees. Now catch hold of the outside of the foot or catch hold of the outside of the shin if the foot's a little bit of a reach. Now look up at the sky. The heart center's really open. Inhale, reach up to the sky, gazing, and then exhale, bend the bottom elbow for a lateral side bend, lateral bend of the spine. And breathe. The gaze is upwards. Bending of the bottom elbow allows the lateral flexion. And everything is aided by the breath. Now on the next inhale, we're going to rise. Inhale, rising. You can wave your arms a little, and then exhale as you bend again. Inhale, rising. Exhale, bending. Inhale, rising. And exhale, bending. Inhale, rise up to the center. Now cross your ankles and rotate your shoulders. Rotate your spine. This rotational movement takes place in the transverse plane of movement. You can wave your arms like the silhouette in the old Bond movies, if you remember that. Wave your arms a little bit. Looks cool. Maybe. Also look from side to side. I'm looking to get some rotational movement in between the vertebrae of the spine. And then stop and swap the legs over. Reaching for the foot or the shin, gaze up at the sky. Inhale, reach up to the sky. Exhale, lateral bend, frontal plane of movement. Side to side stuff. The heart's open, bending the bottom of the elbow allows you to come a bit deeper. Okay, we'll move this into a more dynamic in a second. Inhale, rising and swaying like kelp in the ocean, and exhale, bending. Inhale, rising. Exhale, bending. Inhale and rising. And exhale and bend. Inhale, rising, and cross your ankles and rotation in the transverse plane of movement. If you know your planes of movement, then you can speak with knowledge to other professionals. Know what you're talking about. Come on to the hands and the knees. Ready for cat-cow or cow-cat. Inhale for cow. Exhale for cat. Inhale cow. Exhale cat. Inhale cow. Exhale cat. And then to child pose, to balasana. Just settle down. A nice gentle balasana. Knees apart so that you can snuggle down in between your thighs. Head upon the ground, upon the mat. Arms out to the front. a lovely, gentle, restorative place to be. Let's make that a little bit more dynamic. So come onto your hands and your knees. So inhale for cow, exhale for cat, lowering down to child. Inhale, skim the mat with your chest and your chin and rise up between the hands. Cobra, stretch. Exhale, lower back down. Inhaling, rising up between the hands. I need to be a bit careful with this because of my shoulder. Exhale and lower. 3 more like that. Dynamic, like a wave of movement. Vinyasa, in that you've got movement accompanied by breath. And then after you've completed your 3 cobra stretches, then come back down into balasana, into child pose. So of course with that cat-cow cobra stretch, what you've got there is spinal extension and spinal flexion in the sagittal plane of movement. Just come back up to kneeling and have a look at the what I'd like to show you. You've got spinal flexion, spinal extension, which takes place in the sagittal plane of movement. You've also got in the cat-cow little sequence there, then you've got pelvic tilt. Pelvic tilt. Now, pelvic tilt is important, and it's really important to understand how this works and the language of pelvic tilt. Now, a pelvic tilt is described as being anterior or posterior. So anterior means the front, posterior means the back. Now, I know that because when I was a kid, then because bum was considered to be a little rude by my family, then my parents would talk about your posterior, meaning your bottom. So posterior to me, clearly it means the back. So an anterior pelvic tilt is a frontwards pelvic tilt. And that means when you're visualizing this, then you've got a couple of things you can visualize. You've got your iliac crests here, and then you've got the bowl of the pelvis. In an anterior tilt, a forward tilt of the pelvis, then it tilts forward like so. So from a neutral position, we've got an anterior tilt. So a posterior tilt would be actually you're pushing the groin area forwards so that the iliac crests and the pelvic bowl are tilted in a posterior fashion. So you've got an anterior tilt and a posterior tilt. Again, we'll come back to that a little bit later. Have a little think about how that fits in with your cat-cow. Which one's got the anterior tilt? Which one has got the posterior tilt to it? Got brains and pelvises and hearts and so on all over the place here. From a kneeling position on your mat, place your hands nice and wide so your little fingers are just touching the inside edge of your mat. Step your feet back nice and wide so your little toes are just touching the inside edge of your mat. Make sure your bottom's not sticking up in the air and make sure it's not sagging down towards the ground. So I want Kumbhakasana, plank pose with wide hands and wide feet. Inhale, elevate your right hand off the ground. So the arm comes out to about 45 degrees and you engage your abdominal muscles to enable you to hold that position. Exhale, lower that one back down. Inhale, lift your right foot off the ground. Point your toes. Long leg pointing into the sky. Exhale, lower that one back down. Inhale, left hand rising. I'm not going to do that one because I've got an injured shoulder. And hold. And hold. And exhale, lower that hand back down. Inhale, left foot, rising, point the toes. That's called plantar flexion. When you point your toes like that, plantar flexion, engaging the calf muscles, the soleus and the gastrocnemius at the back of the leg. Exhale, put that one back down. Okay, so here's your challenge then. I want you to elevate your right hand and your left foot at the same time. Right hand, left foot, abdominal muscles engaged, and exhale, lower back down. Opposite corners, elevate the left hand and right foot. I'm not going to do the hand because I'm protecting an injury. And exhale, back down. Opposite corners again, right hand, left foot. Exhale, back down. Opposite corners, left hand, right foot. And exhale, back down. Okay, you can come to the knees briefly if you want to, and we're going to come into a little side plank sequence. Follow me closely with this. Step back to plank. The feet don't need to be wide for this. Step your right foot in between the left hand and the left foot. It's not up here towards the front or even in the middle. It's a comfortable position towards the back, just there to aid your balance. Walk over onto your left-hand side, place your right hand on your hip. Take your gaze up to the sky. Now, if this is challenging enough to your balance, then you can stay here. But if you're okay here, lift the top hand into the sky and stack your right foot on top of the left. Vasisthasana, side plank. Elevate the right leg. What we got there is abduction, taking the leg away from the center line. Bend that right leg, place it flat on the ground behind you. Nice gentle distance behind you. Change your focus. Inhale, allow your head back. Move the top arm to point 45 degrees into the sky and gaze beyond the fingers for your wild thing. Breathing and stretching. Now, engage your abdominal muscles and come smoothly back to your side plank. Smoothly back to your side plank, and then back to Kumbhakasana, back to plank, and then down onto the knees and into child. Gentle child, knees apart, hands out to the front, forehead on the mat. Breathing. And then back onto the hands and the knees and back to plank. Ready for the other side. This time, step your left foot into the balanced kickstand there. Hand on hip. Take your gaze up to the sky. Stack the feet. Take the hand up into the sky. Vasisthasana. Hold it there. Tuck your tailbone in. Tuck your tailbone in. So that's an anterior tilt of the pelvis. Push your heels away. That's dorsiflexion of the feet. Elevate the top leg. Hold. That movement, that moving of one leg away from the other is called abduction. Abduction. I'll come back to that. Now bend the knee, place the foot flat on the ground behind you. Inhale, change your focus, lift the hips, allow the head back, gazing out beyond your fingers in the wild thing. Representative of the wild things that we are. Breathing. Focus. Engage your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, your rectus abdominis. Engage those things. Smoothly back to your side plank. Back to plank, Kumbhakasana, down into the hands and knees, child pose, Balasana, and breathe. And then back up onto the hands and the knees and have a little look and I'll explain a little bit more about planes of movement. So you've got your flexion and your extension, you've got your flexion and your extension. That takes place in the sagittal plane, which is front to back stuff. You've got your lateral flexion, which takes place in the frontal plane. That's lateral flexion of the spine. But you've also got the limbs when they move away from the central line, then that's known as abduction. Abduction. That takes place in the frontal plane, just like your lateral flexion of the spine. So abduction is moving limbs away from the central line. So, for example, if I take a modified side plan, then turn the hand to the sky, then I've got an abduction going on there. Now, as I draw that leg back to the center line and squeeze my feet and thighs together, then that action of bringing the limb back towards the center line is called adduction. You're adding the limb back to the central line of Tadasana as your base point for all of this anatomical movement stuff. Adduction, abduction. That's for your arms and your legs. Of course, the other plane of movement, so that's your frontal plane, front to back. Your sagittal plane is front to back. Your frontal plane is the side-to-side stuff. And then we've got the rotational movement, which takes place in the transverse plane. So that's whether you're rotating the spine or whether you're rotating a limb. That takes place in the transverse plane of movement. Cool, huh? Easy. Okay, let's do something in the transverse plane, and start off on your knees and move your feet out to the right hand side, and then stick your sitting bones into the gap that you've created. Take the right foot across your body. Just get a little sitting up with long spine and a little sense of rotation there. Inhale, right hand reaches up to the sky. Exhale, place the fingers, the hand behind you in line with the spine. The left arm comes across the body. Hook the elbow. I take chin mudra with the finger and the thumb. Inhale, lift from the crown of the head. And exhale, twisting from the belly, from the chest, from the shoulders, from the chin, and lastly with the eyes. Ardha Matsyendrasana, seated twist, half Lord of the Fishes. Breathing, twisting, gazing. Exhale, release the elbow and come back to the center. I've created a little mudra with the fingers and the thumbs here. I've got my gaze through this yoni style mudra that I've created. I want to do the seated twist on the other side. And so what I'm going to do is just gaze in between my fingers and my thumbs and just get off my bottom. And I'm going to keep low as I twist, all the way around until I find myself in the same position, but on the other side. If you haven't already done that, give that a go. If it doesn't work first time for you, because it is a little bit of a strange transition, then just adjust yourself into seated twist on the other side using your usual method. Inhale, left hand reaching. Exhale, ground the fingers. Right arm Just getting a sense of twist. Inhale, lifting. Exhale, twisting. From the stomach, the chest, the chin, the eyes. Ardha Matsyendrasana. Exhale, release the elbow, untwist yourself. Get it out to the other side and come back to the center. Ground your hands. Step back to plank. Exhale through Chaturanga. I'm going to put my knees down to protect my shoulder. Inhale for your cobra or your upward facing dog. Exhale into the downward facing dog. Lower your heels. Push your chest back towards your thighs. Gazing back towards your shins. Rotating your shoulders outward slightly. Rotating your upper arms outward slightly. And engaging Uddiyana Bandha. Draw the tummy in towards the spine. Downward facing dog. Now, pedal your feet up and down, pedal your heels up and down, and take a little rotational movement with the shoulders. Take a little rotational movement with your pelvis. It's like you're you're on the beach in Cuba and you're downward facing dog, and maybe you've had a pina colada, and you've got this funky sort of dancey downward facing dog on the beach in Cuba. And you take on even more movement, rotating your shoulders, rotating your pelvis, bending your elbows, dipping your chest down towards the ground. Getting thinking, oh, this is good because this is gonna develop atrophy in my muscle fibers. My muscles are going to be more defined and a little bigger than they were before. This is going to aid my yoga practice, and this is going to aid me physically throughout my life as well. So you got this funky downward facing dog, and then bring the movement to a stop and push back into downward facing dog proper. Make it a nice downward facing dog. So from downward facing dog, elevate the right leg, pointing the toes. Now rise on the back foot, bend the top knee, draw that knee forward. Draw the knee forward, separating your shoulder blades. Freeze there briefly. If you're not sure, have a quick look at me. Freeze in there briefly, and then place the foot in between the hands. Just creep that foot up to get it where I need it to be. Attention on your left hand, and we're going to windmill our way into Warrior Two. So the left hand windmills over the top and bring yourself to Warrior Two. Now make it a really nice Warrior Two. So bend that front knee. If you need to lengthen your stance, then you can. Come down nice and deep into your Warrior Two. Make sure that front knee isn't collapsing inwards. Make sure it's drawn outwards. And make sure it's drawn outwards there. Now, drawn outwards towards the little toe. So that drawing outwards is activated by your gluteus medius and your tensor fascia lata, a very thin strap of muscle on the outside of the leg. The arms are drawn up to shoulder height. The shoulders, they're not like that, they're relaxed. So you relax the shoulders and you're gazing over your front fingers. Now I'd like you to bring your attention to the back leg, and what I want is a bit of outward rotation of the thigh. So I don't know if you can see it on here, but on your little screen, but I'm going to rotate my thigh outwards, and the effect of that is going to be to really plant that back foot into the ground. So a little outward rotation of the thigh. Now that's your gluteus medius activating. That's gluteus medius that enables that outward rotation, which plants the back foot into the ground. And Eric Schiffman, if you've come across his book, He talks about lines of energy. So we create lines of energy in our yoga practice by activating the muscles. Reach out through your fingertips. Reach out through your fingertips. Gazing over the fingertips. Drishti over the fingertips. Warrior two. Inhale, straighten out the front leg. Reach up and out through the front fingers. Exhale, follow the hand down towards Trikonasana, towards triangle pose. Inhale, turn your gaze up to the sky. Don't worry about being deep in the pose straight off. Just get the shape right. And then as we continue to breathe, you can come deeper into the pose. Play your edge of touch if that's your thing. And breathe and gaze and be. We'll take one more inhale here. Exhale, keep the pose but turn your gaze downwards. Inhale, reach away with the front fingers and bring yourself powerfully back up to standing. Shorten your stance and square your hips up to the front. Shorten your stance and square your hips up, square your chest up to the front. Join your hands together in front of you and then reach up to the sky. Exhale, folding at the waist, gazing beyond the fingers. The pyramid pose. Now at this point, you might want to take your hands down onto the thigh or onto the knee, depending on how flexible you are. You might want to take your fingers down to the ground and support off the ground, the pyramid pose. I'm going to come back to this pose later because there's something in these stronger hamstring stretches. Your body looks to protect itself by initially tightening up the muscles so that you can't come too deep into the pose. So it would be a real mistake to try and come straight into your deepest Parsvattanasana or pyramid pose. Inhale, gaze forward and carefully, gently bend the front knee and step the back foot back so you've got a nice long stance again. Join your hands together, reach away with the fingers and rise up into Virabhadrasana 1. And then exhale as you bend your elbows and take the front forearm on above the knee and then circle the left arm over the top to 45 degrees into the sky. Turn your chin onto your shoulder and gaze drishti out beyond the fingers into Parsvattanasana, side angle pose. If you want to come into a deeper expression of this pose, then you can place the hand inside the foot and press the shoulder into the knee, turning the chin onto the shoulder there for Parsvattanasana. Exhale, turn your gaze downwards. Take the top hand onto your hip. Move the front hand in front of the front foot. Leave your gaze downwards for balance as you step onto the front leg and elevate the back leg. Coming onto the fingertips of the bottom hand. Take the top hand into the sky. Point your toes, elevate the top leg, and open the hips. Open the hips. Open the hips. Open the hips, maybe the fingertips should come off the ground for Ardha Chandrasana, for half moon pose, one of my favorite balances. Ardha Chandrasana. Just breathing in half moon pose. So you've got that powerful abduction of the upper leg. You've got the foot in plantar flexion, toes pointed, and you're breathing. And finally, we exhale and lower the top hand, bend the front leg and touch the back foot down. Ground your hands, step back to plank. Exhale as you lower through chaturanga, use the knees if you need to. Inhale for Bhujangasana for cobra or upward facing dog. And then exhale into downward facing dog. Ready for the other side. It's important to do both sides, otherwise we'll end up all lopsided. Breathe in. From downward facing dog, elevate the left leg. Rise on toes, bend the knee, draw the knee forward. Place the foot in between the hands. Attention to the right hand. Windmill, warrior two. Virabhadrasana 2, check in with the front knee, check in with the shoulders, check in with your drishti. Uddiyana Bandha is engaged. Little outward rotation of the back leg. Powerful. Virabhadra, warrior. Inhale, straighten out the front leg. Reach up and out. Exhale, follow the hand down, down, down. Inhale, opening, gazing, reaching, and most importantly, breathing. Maybe coming a little deeper if that feels right for your body. Be aware of any niggles, be aware of any little injuries you might be carrying. Take another inhale. Exhale, turn your gaze downwards. Inhale, reach away with the fingers, rising back up to standing. Shorten your stance, square your hips up, square the chest up. Join the hands. Inhale, reach up to the sky. And exhale, keep the front leg straight, keep the back leg straight as you bend at the waist. Gazing out beyond your fingers and supporting off the leg or off the ground. For Parsvattanasana. This lockdown is not doing much good for my flexibility. More yoga, that's what we need. More yoga. Breathing. Being aware that the specialist cells that are located either in the tendons or in the belly of the muscle, called proprioceptors. Proprioceptors feed back to your nervous system about your position in space, which is gauged through the tension within the tendons and the muscles. Inhale, join the hands, reaching up, rising back up to standing, and then exhale, bring your hands to heart center. We're going to step back to create some a longer stance. Forearm onto the knee, circle the other arm over the top. I'm not going to do that actually because of my shoulder. I'm just got to be really careful with this one. And Parsvattanasana. Parsvattanasana, side angle pose with the option to take a deeper expression if that's right for your body. Breathing, gazing, being. So I've introduced the idea of proprioceptors. Proprioceptors feed back to your central nervous system about your position in space. They're specialist cells located in the tendons and in the belly of the muscle. We'll talk a little bit more about those later. They are very, very relevant to getting the best out of a yoga practice. For the Parsvattanasana, take the top hand onto your hip and move the front hand in front of your front foot. Elevate the back leg, pointing the toes. Take the top hand into the sky. Opening and rising and blossoming like a lotus flower. Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose. You can leave the gaze downwards, it aids with the balance. Breathing. And then exhaling. Take the top hand down to the ground. Step both feet back. Ground your hands. Lower through Chaturanga. Take a vinyasa through upward facing dog. Back to downward facing dog. And then back down onto the knees. Well done, folks. Just cross your ankles and rock back to sitting. Extend your legs out in front of you, and I lost some of my feet there. Extend your legs out in front of you and tuck your right foot high up inside the thigh there. Just make sure everything's nice and square. Sitting bones are level with each other, and take the foot into dorsiflexion. So foot position, in simple terms, you can point your toes, plantar flexion. This is the plantar part of the foot. So you're taking that plantar part of the foot into flexion. That's known as plantar flexion in anatomical terminology. And then we've got dorsiflexion, where you're bringing the foot back towards the shin. Does it matter? Well, yeah, it does. It does. It matters on two levels. Number one, yoga, nothing's left to chance. Everything's with intention. Every position of the body. You don't let the feet flop around. You will be cueing your students either to take plantar flexion or dorsiflexion. I actually use those terms because my students are used to that. But you can simply say point your toes or bring your foot back towards the shin, pushing your heel away. But also in terms of the anatomical effect, it's different. If you've got your plantar flexion, then that's going to engage the muscles in the back of the leg here. You got your calf muscles of the soleus and the gastrocnemius. You've got plantar flexion engaging those. And dorsiflexion, then rather than engaging those muscles, you're going to lengthen those muscles. That might be a desired effect. You might prefer that. So dorsiflexion, you're going to lengthen those muscles, but you're going to then engage the anterior tibialis. So anterior at the front, tibialis related to the tibia muscle, the tibia bone within the leg there. So if you take your dorsiflexion and you're engaging a different muscle, the tibialis anterior on the front of the leg there, whilst lengthening the back of the leg. So you get a different effect depending on how you cue the pose. For example, if you're in headstand, then you can use either plantar flexion or dorsiflexion, depending on what you want to engage or lengthen in the lower part of the leg. Take dorsiflexion, catch hold of the foot or the shin. Inhale, gaze forwards. Exhale, bend your elbows downwards and outwards for head to knee pose. Janu Sirsasana, head to knee pose. Breathing. And keeping the gaze towards the foot, keeping that length in the spine. And using the exhales to come a little bit deeper. Inhale back up to sitting and swap the legs over. Catch the foot, inhale, gaze forwards. Exhale, bending the elbows and folding. Breathing. A little bit of forward gaze to keep the length in the spine. And then inhale as you come back up to sitting, both legs out in front. Catch the big toes, inhale, gaze forwards. Exhale, bend the elbows. Draw your tummy in to create some space. We were talking about lockdown weight, weren't we? Draw the tummy in, breathing. Paschimottanasana, Paschimottanasana. Lengthening the back of the lower legs, lengthening the hamstring group, lengthening the glutes, lengthening the erector spinae, lengthening the trapezius, lengthening the rhomboids, everything lengthening. Except the tibialis anterior, because my feet are in dorsiflexion. Inhale, back up to sitting, and relax. Let's just consider the legs briefly. You got your quadricep group of muscles on the front, and you've got a hamstring group of muscles on the back there. With the quadricep group, then you've got a number of muscles that are known as vastus something or other. For example, the vastus lateralis on the outside, and then you've got a large muscle which crosses two joints. It crosses the knee joint, and it also crosses the hip joint here. So what muscle would that be? The rectus femoris. Rectus femoris. So it crosses two joints, and it's particularly important because it's a major muscle of hip flexion. So your rectus femoris, part of the quadricep group, is because it crosses your hip here, then it enables this hip flexion movement here. The rectus abdominis doesn't cross that joint. It attaches to the pelvis rather than the upper leg. So, for example, if you're doing sit-ups and stuff, then what enables you to do that is going to be hip flexion. It is hip flexion. So it's not your rectus abdominis. Your rectus abdominis is involved as a synergist, as an assisting muscle, but the prime mover is going to be your rectus femoris, because that crosses the joint, enabling that flexion. I'm hoping that makes sense, but we can explore it a little bit more later. When you've got movement, when you've got physical movement, then you must have one muscle or a group of muscles which is contracting. So this muscle here, this bicep muscle, is contracting to enable this flexion at the elbow. Now, if a muscle's contracted, that's known as the prime mover or the agonist. Prime mover, agonist in elbow flexion at the elbow. Now, if you've got an agonist, there must be an antagonist. There must be a muscle, a group of muscles, which while this one is contracted and becoming shorter, is becoming longer. So what you've got here in this simple anatomical movement of flexion at the elbow is an antagonist here, the bicep, and so an agonist here, the prime mover, which is shortening, and the antagonist here, the tricep muscle, which is lengthening. Now, this principle, which tells us that if there's movement taking place, then there must be one muscle or group of muscles shortening, whilst another muscle or group of muscles is lengthening, is known as the principle of reciprocal inhibition. Reciprocal inhibition. Shortening on one side, lengthening on the other side. Agonist, antagonist. Now, also aiding in this are other muscles in the area which aren't doing the big job, but are helping, they're assisting with the movement, and they're known as synergist muscles. So you've got agonist, antagonist, synergist, three types of muscles that are part of any movement, any physical movement that we take. And in our case, what the physical movement that we're interested in specifically is that of yoga. Come onto your knees and ground your hands. Ground your hands shoulder width apart. Spread your fingers. Make sure your hands are squared up, so they're not spun outwards. They're not angled inwards. They're nicely squared up. And then come onto the balls of your feet. Croup down, bend your elbows backwards, about 45 degrees backwards and outwards, and then place the top of your shin just below the knees up onto a little shelf of arm above your elbows. Okay, so come up onto the tiptoes, take your drishti forwards. What you've got here is preparation for Kakasana, but there's no structure there. Let's get some structure into it. Okay, we've got the hands grounded, we've got the elbows bent, we've got the knees just below the knees is placed, you've got the drishti forwards. Now squeeze your knees inwards. Squeeze your knees inwards. So what you've got going on there is you're looking for adduction. Adduction using the adductor muscles on the inside of the thighs. Squeeze your knees inwards, separate the shoulder blades. Separate the shoulder blades, engaging the serratus anterior, creating structure in the upper part of the spine. And then come up onto the tippy toes and maybe draw your heels up to your sitting bones. Kakasana, crow pose. And hold that. And breathe. And then come down onto the knees. So you cueing your yoga students to squeeze the knees inwards and to draw the shoulder blades apart creates structure within the pose. It creates structure within the pose by making agonists of particular muscles and muscle groups. By squeezing the knees inwards, it makes your adductor group of muscles the agonists. By separating your shoulder blades, then it makes the serratus anterior, which you've got fingers of muscle attaching the upper ribs to the inside edges of your shoulder blades. So when you draw the shoulder blades apart, you're engaging those big chunky fingers of muscle, serratus anterior, and creating structure in the upper spine. So you're cueing, draw the knees in, take your shoulders apart, has a very specific effect on the muscles, making agonists out of some, making antagonists and synergists out of others, which the effect being to create structure within the pose and helping your yoga students to develop strength and flexibility and peace of mind through their practice. Okay, cool. Come down into your tummy. And just bring your feet a double fist width apart. So just bring your feet a little bit apart and let your heels rock outwards. Then bring your hands level with your thighs and gaze forwards and prepare for locust pose, Salabhasana. Inhale, elevate your thighs, elevate your chest, gazing forwards. Salabhasana. Breathing. Spine is an extension in the sagittal plane of movement. The erector spinal group of muscles, your gluteus maximus, engaged, whilst the front of the body is antagonist, is lengthened. I don't know if you've ever looked at a locust really closely. No, keep the pose. But they got little smiley faces. So the advanced version of this pose is a little locust smile. It's just like that. So just finish off the pose with a little locust smile, and then exhale as you lower back down to the ground and push yourself back into child pose as a counter pose. Just breathing in child pose. Breathe. Take a little time there. Okay, back onto your tummy, bend your knees, catch hold of the feet. Inhale, elevate the thighs, elevate the chest. For Dhanurasana, for bow pose. Breathing. Okay, let's lift the chest a little higher. Draw the knees together a touch. Let's get a little bit of, let's engage the specific group of muscles on the inside of the thighs. Draw the knees together. Let's get the adductor group of muscles working as well. And exhale, lower yourself back down and take a counter pose, which again is child. But this time with the child pose, what I want you to do is to catch hold of the very bottom of your feet and bring your head right in between your knees. Let's get as much spinal flexion into the pose as is possible. That's spinal flexion. And then come back up to sitting. Extend your legs out in front of you. Feet in dorsiflexion. Hands flat on the ground, level with your hip sockets, what's called the acetabulum, where the top of your leg fits into the socket, the acetabulum. So hands level with the hip sockets, and then straighten your arms, push your heels away, tuck your chin. Tuck your chin down onto the chest. Let's engage one of the energy locks there. And also gently affecting the thyroid gland. So you start to think about the endocrine system, or endocrine system, tomato thing. So you're pushing into the hands, you've got your chin tucked. Now let's engage another bando, another energy lock. Bring your belly button in towards the spine. A little bit of a lift there as well. Engaging Uddiyana Bandha. Keep your chin tucked, engage Uddiyana Bandha, and then engage your pelvic floor. It's as if you were trying to stop yourself from peeing mid-flow. So do that. Engage those particular muscles. Engage your pelvic floor. So you've got your chin tucked, you've got Uddiyana Bandha engaged, you've got the pelvic floor engaged. You're pushing into the hands. Push into the hands a little bit deeper, just elevate your sitting bones off the ground slightly, pushing the heels away. And then exhale as you relax. It's one of those poses, one of those asana, where from the outside it doesn't look like there's much going on, but on the inside there's like everything is going on. Bandhas, energy locks, engagement, agonists, antagonists, synergist muscles, all of that stuff going on, and of course the mental aspects of it as well. From sitting, just make sure you've got a bit of space behind you, and point your toes and draw your arms up to shoulder height. Engage your abdominal muscles, lower yourself down onto the ground. Place your hands onto the ground, ready for shoulder stand. Push into the hands, lift your feet into the sky. Point your toes, so we go for plantar flexion. Lift your pelvis off the ground and catch hold of your back. Walk your elbows inwards towards the center line and walk your hands up towards your shoulder blades. Shoulder stand. Keep your shoulder stand, so when you see me move them, it's just so that I can have a look at what's going on. So keep your pose. Make sure that you are actually on your shoulders and not trying to balance on the back of your head. Plantar flexion. And then move your feet into dorsiflexion. Draw your toes back towards the shins, push your heels away. Engaging different muscles in the lower part of the legs. Then back into plantar flexion. Really point those toes. Really engage those calf muscles. Soleus, gastrocnemius. Breathing. Now, I'd like to transition into bridge pose, into Setu Bandhasana. So the way I want to do this is to scissor the legs. So scissor the legs. If you're not sure, you can have a quick look at me on the screen there. Turn your hands the other way up for comfort, and then that foot that's up farthest away from my head, I'll take that one to the ground first, followed by the other foot, and then just settle myself into bridge pose, into Setu Bandhasana. Just square up the feet on the mat. Maybe tuck your elbows under a little bit deeper, and rotate your thighs inwards. Rotate your thighs inwards, draw your knees a little bit more together. Now, what we've got here, the shoulder stand then of this pose is flexion of the cervical spine, flexion of the neck part of the spine. So we really need a counter pose to that. Now, you've got an option here. Just come back down to the ground and tuck yourself into a counter pose. So into a ball as your counter pose. And just come back up to sitting and have a look at me on the screen. So in your shoulder stand and in your bridge pose, and you've got your chin tucked on the chest. And so you've got maximum flexion of the upper part of the spine, of the cervical spine, or C-spine, as is sometimes referred to. So flexion of the C-spine, it would make a lot of sense having spent some time with that maximum flexion, stimulating the thyroid and parathyroid glands in that area. It would make a lot of sense for our next pose to take our C-spine into extension in the sagittal plane of movement. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're coming towards the end of our practice. We're going to take fish pose, and I'll talk us through coming into fish pose. I think it comes later in your teacher training, but we'll go into it now. So from a lying down position, then put your feet flat on the ground, and you're going to lift your hips off the ground. Interlock your thumbs and spread your fingers. So lift your hips and interlock your thumbs and spread your fingers. Now here's the real key thing. Get your shoulders underneath your body. Get your shoulders underneath your body, and then lower your body down onto your arms. You can unhook the thumbs and spread your fingers there, and then straighten your legs out. Feet together, dorsiflexion with the feet. Then push into your elbows and push into your forearms as you lift the heart center. Lifting your heart center, your sternum, and allowing the head back. There's not really any weight on the top of the head, it's just gently against the ground. The weight is in the elbows and the forearms. What we've got here is the ability to breathe with maximum tidal volume. Tidal volume is the amount of breath that you can inhale or exhale in one breath, the amount of air. So you're maximizing the tidal volume here. And this pose is said to be awesomely therapeutic for chest and respiratory problems. Just breathing in fish. Now push into your arms, push into your forearms, your elbows, so that you can safely slide the head back to lower your upper back onto the ground. Release your hands, bend your knees and catch hold of the big toes. So 2 fingers per big toe, and have a really good rock around. Have a good rock and roll. And a play, it's like a return to playfulness. You can rock to one side and rock to the other side, and you can straighten your legs, and you can take a wide-legged bow and just have a little play around. It doesn't matter if you fall, it doesn't matter if you giggle. None of it matters. It's a return to playfulness. It's one of my favourite asana. It's happy baby. And then find your comfy place on your back. Find your comfy place on the mat with your feet wide and your hands turned up towards the sky. And your breath long. And your face relaxed. And a little hint of a smile upon your lips. Shavasana. You bring your attention to your forehead and just relax your forehead. It's like the top of your head is melting. Just relax your forehead and relax your eyes and relax the space around your eyes and relax your face. But keep that little hint of a smile. It's like a profound sense of surrender. But this little hint of, I got this. This little hint of sass, if you like. I can forge my own destiny. Yeah, I surrender to what the universe throws at me, but I'm going to steer things in the direction of my choosing also. Relax your shoulders, relax your lungs if that's a thing. Relax your lungs. Now bring your attention to your fingers and your toes and give them a little wiggle. Start the movement really small. Fingers and toes all moving together. Just a little baby movement. And then start to increase the movement so that you got like lots of movement in your fingers and in your toes. Loads of movement. Get them wiggling, get them moving. So it becomes a little bit of frantic movement of the fingers and the toes. And then stop that movement and bring your feet together. Bring your knees up to your chest and wrap your arms around your legs. Bring your head to your knees and give yourself a big squeeze. We all need plenty of self-love. Give yourself that self-love now. A big squeeze, a big push, as we call it in Wales. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And then cross your ankles and relax your squeeze. Just take hold of your knees gently and rock along the length of your spine. Rocking back and forth between your tail and the top of your neck. coccyx to atlas bone. Rocking back and forth, and then back to sitting. Back to Sukhasana, back to your choice of easy sitting pose. This time we'll take our hands to heart center. Namaste.